This might look like an ICT lesson, but these pupils are in a humanities class, learning about history using modern technology. These tablets contain everything needed for the lesson, an online textbook, the World Wide Web, and space for pupils to store their work when they've finished.
We've got to teach students how to research on the internet, how to process that information and then come up with something that is their own work. And that's part of a taught process that should, that you would do within your lessons.
Cornwallis Academy says it's leading a revolution in learning. The paperless school concept has helped cut costs, and teachers believe the children are more motivated and enthusiastic.
I think it's a lot easier to use than a textbook, because if you don't understand something in the class, you don't have to get up and ask the teacher. You could just type it into a search engine.
You can use the internet to find out facts and things, and if you're doing a PowerPoint, you can find pictures to go with it.
Classroom of the future? Technology gone too far? Or a necessity for the 21st century pupil? Let's begin with Sarah Mussey. Now, you're from the campaign for the book. Does this alarm you?
Well, it amuses me, actually, because it does sound a bit like a piece for a scene from a novel in the future. What I don't understand, I think, is that why there has to be a competition between technology and the book. Why the book has to be the fall guy, if you like, for a technological system in which education is delivered through ICT. We are living in an age where there are more children reading than ever before. Since the advent of Harry Potter, there's been a reading explosion amongst our youth, and it seems a strange time to me to decide to close the book on it.
Philip, I mean, when online resources are mushrooming, the places you can go to for information are growing by the month for reliable sources of information as well. I mean, doesn't that make curriculum planning harder to take in all these things?
Yes and no, but I mean, fundamental to our work on literacy is promotion of reading of fiction. And there is nothing like the relationship with a book, although it can be an e-book. I've just got an e-book reader. But seriously, all these channels of communication are there. All the internet, multitasking, mobile phones, text messaging. Students are doing these things anyway. And in universities, they're frequently communicating with their lecturers by them. I think we have to embrace these technologies, teach children how to use them sensibly, how to use them well. But the writing of argument, the research and evaluation of evidence are absolutely critical things to develop, because whether they're information sources of the internet or anything else, cutting and pasting won't do. And what we've got to teach children to do is to use these sources of information and the sources of communication well. And I think much more than just getting your work to and from a computer, the real power of IT is supporting communities of learning. And that means embracing all sorts of forms of social networking and turning them into ways that children can actually learn with each other better.
Can I hear from some of the teachers and students as well in the room? And what were you going to say?
Too much time is spent on technology and less writing. Basically, they're not getting the book out. Children are not getting the books out. They're just spending time too much on the internet and on the computer, so homework's not being done really. They say that my child's actually saying, I'm doing my homework. He's on the computer, and I don't know whether he's done it or not.
Yes, what would you say?
I would say it's a good idea to introduce more technology into the classroom, because if a child is spending more time than outside or with their friends on a computer, say they're using it as an excuse. If they can use the computer for their classwork or homework or anything like that.
But you just cut and paste?
Not cut and paste. If they want, it's their decision. But what I think is that it will encourage them to do their homework, or, for example, in their class, some students are more able than the others.
The gentleman on the end there, yeah.
Hi there. I feel a bit out of place because it's a room full of academics. Really, there's nothing for the kids who aren't good at academic pursuits. That's what worries me most of all. As an employer, we employ a lot of young people in their early 20s. We cannot find an engineer or a tradesman anywhere. It really worries me, this obsession with computers and gadgetry and teaching these kids that it's the only thing in the world. They've got to learn things that they could do with their hands, especially boys, and do something useful. All this twiddling along. They don't even teach women. They don't even teach people to type.
Sorry, Khan.
You know, I think, I'm sorry to say, but I think that's quite an old-fashioned view. Even if you are a plumber, even if you are a corgi gasman, you still need to know how to access technology.
Absolutely.
All of those things are determined by that.
Absolutely.
But you know, I am absolutely all for the internet. I don't care how a child reads. You know, a classic. If they want to read it on the internet,
I'm not excluding
as long as they're reading it, that's the most important thing. I think computers allows for accessibility, and some children. I mean, you know, for me, I've got an iPhone, but I don't read stuff on there. I'd rather still have a newspaper, and I think it's about giving people choice.
But it's the reliability of the resource as well, isn't it? Yeah. Alison Wheeler from Wikimedia. Not everything you read on the internet is true, is it?
A lot of it is, though. That's the point. Wikipedia, which is one of the projects from Wikimedia, 2.5 million articles in English alone. Most of those are entirely accurate, but we're a pointer, we aren't the source.
That's a big claim, most of them entirely accurate.
Yes. You walk down your street.
That's not your reputation.
It is, exactly, it's the media, I'm sorry, it's the media that do this. You walk down your street, you may see a little bit of graffiti, and it'll get cleared up. We're the same. There's little bits of problem, but they get cleared up quickly. We have people from 9 to 90, updating that because they're interested. They're almost being teachers by wanting to pass that information on. Whether it's somebody doing a project at school, I mean, it's, as you said earlier, it's that whole taking things from all parts of the curriculum to say, put these together and work from them. Somebody looks at an article on Wikipedia, they say, oh, that's wrong, I'll correct it, which is great. They're helping pass that information on. But also they're linking through to something else and saying, oh, now I'm learning about that. Something I learnt when I was young is you can't ask the right question until you know 80% of the answer. We're trying to give you that start to get you in the right direction.
I think there's a bigger challenge. I mean, first of all, this in an evening of false dichotomies, this dichotomy between the book and the computer is completely ridiculous. I mean, people need to read great books, but textbooks are not generally speaking great works of literature. So, you know, the fact that people can get information better from their computer than textbooks doesn't seem to me to be a crisis in our love of literature. But I think the bigger challenge about online learning is that young people are used to being able to get the information they want when they want to get it. And I find it quite interesting. People say, young people, they don't work very hard. They go home in the evening and they spend hours on PlayStation. Well, yeah, they do. But what are they doing on PlayStation? They're trying to get to higher and higher levels. So they're working at it, and they're working at a system which is very cleverly designed to give them feedback and to encourage them to go to the next level and the next level. And I think the bigger challenge for education is that as young people expect those kind of systems that give them feedback all the time, that encourage them to go to the next level, that traditional kind of standing up front of a class is harder. And in particular, it's a tough time to be a mediocre teacher. When I was a kid, I accepted mediocre teachers. You know, we were more deferential. I watched the boring bits of Blue Peter to get to the interesting bits. Young people don't now. If something's boring, they switch over. And that's why we have to think much more fundamentally, I think, about learning processes. Because if young people aren't part of that process, then I think we've got a problem. I mean, lots of issues, but one of the problems is to be order in the classroom.
Philip, here, I mean, what seems to be the case is that in certain industries, the online evolution, if you like, and revolution has transformed certain industries. Certainly transformed what I do, probably what Matthew does in terms of access to information. It doesn't seem to have revolutionised teaching yet.
No,
and you wonder why not.
Well, I think we are struggling with it. I think to keep children e-safe, we've tended to have a not let access policy. I'm beginning to think that's wrong for the reasons I said earlier. I think that we don't have enough kit. But as the price of technology becomes... I mean, quite soon, all the computer children will need in school is a clever one of these, and it'll log on to the wireless network, and they'll be able to get all sorts of information from it. It's not a substitute for teaching children to read and interrogate text properly. It's not a substitute for science. It's not a substitute for history. It's a way that can help these things.
And when you're all using different information sources, will you still be able to plan your lessons?
It can help children interact with each other as well as their teacher, and that's one of the great powers this information revolution offers up. It can either be used educationally very well, or we can try and block it and be very, very dismissive of it, and I think that would be a danger, because young people are using this technology outside the classroom anyway, so we need to find intelligent ways of using it inside. But unless we teach them to evaluate evidence, to analyse, to read and think for themselves, it'll be complete rubbish. So those things haven't got out of the way. This is a tool, it's not an end in itself.
Briefly, if you will, Alan Smithers.
Well, I agree with Philip. The only way you can harness all the powers that the internet gives us is if you can work out what is true and what isn't true. And this is why you need this firm grounding in the subjects. Now, living a life now actually isn't so very different from living a life 2,000 years ago. So all this talk about the 21st century seems to me that you're in danger, as that film we saw, of running away with the notion I never really understood, which is the medium is the message. As far as schooling is concerned, it's the message that's important.
OK, we're coming to the end, and I want to pose the question to you all that I began with. In the light of everything we've talked about, is the curriculum fit for the 21st century? Matthew Taylor.
Actually, I think the interesting thing is if you go around schools, there's an immense amount of innovation taking place, and I think that's what we've got to get used to. Secondary schools are big businesses. They've all got to have their own kind of R&D capacity, and the curriculum is changing, it's becoming more flexible, and I look forward to a day where every school you go to is doing slightly different things, geared to those pupils, growing out of the engagements of those pupils, and there's a system which is learning all the time and experimenting. That's what I think we need.
Sarah Khan.
I disagree with you in saying that school is business. I don't think schools are businesses. They are centres for people to learn and access information so they can go and develop their life when they leave. I think technology is fundamental for young people to take them forward and be prepared for work.
Alan Smithers.
We need a curriculum, but the one we have at the moment doesn't work properly. It is overloaded. It needs to be sorted out, and you need to work out what are the essentials, what do you allow to differ between schools. The government, sadly, hasn't gone about this in a very sensible way. It's dealt with it in 4 slices. It's dealt with the early years foundation stage. It's dealt with the Rose Review, which is separate for primary. It's rewritten the curriculum for Key Stage 3, the 11 to 14-year-olds, and it's introduced diplomas. Instead of those separate slices, we need something that gives all children a good basis for the lives that they will lead, which runs through from when they begin their schooling to when they leave qualified to go to work.
Nick Waters.
I think it's balance in all things. I think that books are beautiful things, but some of them tell fibs. I believe that the curriculum could take more account of technology than it dare, and we've got to be braver in our schools to take things forward. I think that there are teachers all over the country doing amazing things in schools because they recognise that the curriculum is not just the lessons, it's the lessons, the events, the routines, and what youngsters do after school and beyond school brought together to make sense in their lives. And I see many, many young people benefiting by becoming successful, confident and responsible people at the end of their curriculum experience. Many people who criticise it haven't read it or distort it in the telling, which just goes to prove that what's written down is not always correct. What they do need, though, young people, is to use technology to the full, whilst at the same time making, doing and mending, spending time outside and enjoying the world in which they live.
Philippa here.
Children need to leave school with a core set of values that are fit for a liberal democratic society. I think that's really important, and those haven't changed. We teach them through creating schools that embrace the whole child, teach respect, teach reconciliation, teach right from wrong, teach truth. But in terms of the content that children learn, it needs to be well grounded in the core of things we already know you need to know to be able to be an active citizen, but actually it also needs to give young people the willingness and ability to learn the answers to the questions we don't even know are going to arise, because that is what's going to happen. Different things are going to happen that throw up new questions. Our young people need to be able to find good answers to them and then good ways of living with them based on strong values.